In all our waking, dreaming and sleeping states of consciousness, what we live is a relative reality. So we know from our own life what relative realities are. All the experience, all the life, all the waves of happiness that one lives during dreaming or waking, and all the restfulness that one lives in the sleep, all this is the relative realities. So we have been living relative realities since birth. So relativity is directly known to us. And now, ever since we started to meditate, started to transcend, getting to that transcendent, unbounded awareness, pure consciousness, we know that the absolute, unbounded, pure awareness, pure consciousness is also our direct experience. So, relative life is our direct experience. The absolute transcendental reality is our direct experience. We know what the reality of life is. Ultimate reality, transcendental pure consciousness. Relative realities, all that the life is during waking, dreaming and sleeping. Waking, dreaming, sleeping states of consciousness we are living. And ever since we started to meditate, we have quite a good taste of transcendental pure consciousness, the fourth state of consciousness, which is absolute in its nature. This is the ultimate reality. Through meditation, we know this is the innermost aspect of our life. Pure awareness is the innermost region of our existence. So that extremity of life, the ultimate reality, and this extremity of life in the waking and dreaming and sleeping. Two extremities of life. And to both extremities, our awareness is open to the gross relative realities. We are open in waking and dreaming and sleep states. Different realities, different structure of life, different values of existence in different states of consciousness. And therefore, by direct experience we know fourth state of consciousness, innermost region of our personality. That we know by direct experience. This we know by direct experience. Both the extremities, both sides of the coin of life we are aware. And when we are aware that the coin is intact on both sides, it can be used in the market. If one side is not very good, it may be suspicious. But when both sides are intact, this and this and this and this, life is intact, and then it can be marketed. Every coin can be expounded for its value. This much and this much and this much and this much. Life is expounded for its values. And the values of life, the realities of life, are both relative and absolute. So we market 200% value of life. And that is our marketing value of life. 200% value. And if we find the market is a little dull or something like that, we come out with a more emphatic price. It has to be 200%. Less than 200%, no good. That is our value of life. That is our evaluation about life. That is our evaluation about ourselves and about everyone, everywhere in the world. Deep within everyone is deep within himself. everyone is infinite, unbounded, eternal, unmanifest, pure, bliss consciousness. Outside, everyone is expressing the wave of that unbounded bliss, like an ocean, silent ocean of life, and advancing, rising waves of life. Relativity is just the advancing, rising wave of eternal life. And deep within, life is eternal. Like deep within, the ocean is silent and deep. On the surface, it's moving, advancing, rising. And as the waves rise high, they advance faster and easier. And strong waves cannot be obstructed even by the wind from the opposite side. And that should be the wave of the relative life of everyone. Advancement, progress towards fulfillment. Every wave in the ocean has an aspiration to rise high and dash against the hill and clear the way for all times. Every individual has that aspiration of living that unboundedness of life. All the search for more and more, which is natural to everyone, the search for more in life is the very instinct of life. The very nature of life is to move towards more and more and more and more. This is because more than the most is the source of the flow of life. Deep within, in the field of being, the life is infinite. And from that infinite source, the relative value, the waves of living arise. And they rise to rise high and advance. Every wave has the aspiration of incorporating the whole value of the ocean. And every wave has a chance of incorporating the whole depth of the ocean. It is only necessary to keep on incorporating more and more from within as one is rising higher and higher. The activity of rising high must be supported by activity of amassing more from the base. And then the whole ocean would be ready to sign up for one single wave. That is the power of one single wave. The ocean is ready to cooperate with fullness and full support. And each single wave is able to have the whole strength of the ocean. And then it is a wave and an ocean in a wave. This is the structure of individual life. The possibility is enormous, unbounded. No boundaries for the great possibilities for every human being, because the life itself is such. The structure of a wave is such that it can incorporate the whole of the ocean within it. The structure of human life is such. Every single individual human life is embedded in the eternity. The eternity can be lively in every single individual human existence. And the technique is TM. Life is relative and absolute both together. Not that I am only absolute unbounded. I am absolute unbounded like the silent deep of the ocean, silent depth of the ocean, and I am relative as the floating waves of the ocean, moving, advancing, rising waves of the ocean. So, moving, advancing, rising, evolving towards fulfillment is the nature of our relative life. And the nature of the absolute deep within the relative is unchanging, unbounded, eternal being. So this within and this without, both together constitute life. Reality of life means both together. No coin can have only one side and be valid in the market. Has to have two sides. If life has to be lived, if life has to be in the field of living, it has to be in the field of relative. And in order to be, it must have to be in being. It's very simple. Relativity to be, being has to be. So being is within life and living is on the surface of being. When I said being is deep within living and living is on the surface of being, now this statement should be verified, how far it is true and where it falls short of truth. Sap is deep within the flower, and the flower is on the surface of the sap. It's very obvious. Colorless sap is what the flower is made of. But we don't see the colorless sap. What we see is beautiful pink. Pink on the surface is seen. What is not seen is the colorless sap. And therefore, obviously, we say sap must be within it. We say sap is within it. The colorless is the basis of the color. On the surface is the color. At the depth is the colorless. This is one statement, and obviously it is reasonable because from our direct perception we know that the colorless is not seen on the surface. It is the pink that is seen on the surface. But because the pink wouldn't be without the sap, and therefore we say the sap is within it. But when we analyze closely every fiber of the pink, what we find is it is colorless sap. Every fiber of the petal is sap, inside, outside, even on the surface it is sap. At the depth it must be, but even on the surface it is sap. Close analysis of the situation gives us a very clear picture that the sap is not only deep within the petal, but it is on the surface of the petal also. But as long as our vision is not trained to comprehend the colorless on the pink color petal, so long we see not the colorless sap, we see only the petal. It's a matter of our ability of perception. When the ability of perception could grow, the sap could be comprehended on the surface of the petal. The colorless could be comprehended on the surface of the pink. And then we will have the pink and the colorless both together, even on the surface, even at the depth. And this will be the reality of vision. This will be the reality of the petal. And this will be the reality of our comprehension, of our vision. But the reality of the petal will always be colorless sap and the pink, petal and the sap, petal and the sap on the surface and the depth. This is the reality of the petal. But it depends on how much we are able to perceive, whether our vision is dominated by the pink or our vision is dominated by the colorless. It will depend, the valuation of this situation, that the petal is colorless and pink both at the same time. The reality of this situation will depend upon how much we are able to comprehend, how much refined is it our vision, whether our vision is dominated by the pink or it can be dominated by the colorless. If we can comprehend the colorless and the pink, we enjoy 200% value of the flower, the inner reality and the surface value both together. This is true in every case our vision falls on. Whatever we comprehend, whatever we envision, whatever we see, whether we only comprehend the surface value of the objects or that which is deep within the object at one time and comes on the surface to be appreciated. What is deep within the object? That which is present everywhere, like the sap present everywhere. This green also is the manifestation of the colorless. This hard stem green is also the manifestation of the colorless sap. This tender petal pink also is the expression of the colorless sap. So the same colorless sap present everywhere expresses itself differently and becomes so many different qualities. Like that, pure being, pure life, unmanifest life, which is abstract, non-concrete, that expresses itself into so many varieties, and the world of multiplicity crops up. But as in every of these cases, green or pink or whatever, hard or soft or whatever, in all these different qualities, the colorless sap is dominating. It is in and out. So also, in every manifest life in creation, all this diversity, multiplicity, variety, one unmanifest pure being, pure existence, pure intelligence, pure consciousness is omnipresent, present in and out and out. That unmanifest pure consciousness is bliss consciousness. Its nature is bliss. So the reality of the variety of existence, the reality of all relative existence is pure happiness, unboundedness of life, eternity, pure awareness, transcendental consciousness, that which we experience many times in the morning and many times in the evening within 20 minutes. Within 20 minutes of our meditation, we have been diving into that pool of life, into that content of life, that reality which has expressed itself into all this variety of the creation. So by our experience, we know the reality to be absolute, non-changing, and that we know to be our inner reality, and by experience we know the manifest aspect of that into the waves of relative existences, and that is the whole story of life with which we are familiar.
What is the relationship between the will, ego, and intellect and mind, and how does it evolve?
We were talking of the reflection. Now the reflection. Supposing green water in a glass, and then the reflection is green. What is this reflection? This is consciousness, you see. Being, same being everywhere. Now, my being, your being, being of the table, being of this being. Different beings crop up, and there is some difference. Green, and this individual being is like a reflection. how much being is reflected, how much awareness one is exhibiting in life, how much awareness one is exhibiting in life. That depends on how much the nervous system can reflect. We say the quality of reflection depends on the quality of the reflector, quality of nervous system. We have seen, Dr. Canalagas tells us, physiology changes as consciousness grows. Now he has made study physiology of sleep, physiology of what is the style of functioning of nervous system when one is sleeping. What is the style of functioning of nervous system when one is dreaming? What is the style of functioning of nervous system when one is awake? Similarly, what is the style of nervous system when one has that pure consciousness, transcendental consciousness during meditation? So, it is the reflection of the same being from different conditions of nervous system that we call the state of consciousness. And we know states of consciousness keep on changing. We are asleep, dreaming, waking, pure consciousness. Now that consciousness, it is the consciousness on the basis of which life is lived. Now, in totality we call it consciousness. When we analyze a little more closely, we begin to feel the mind thinking, something inside thinking. Deciding is another faculty. Something inside thinks, we call it mind. Something inside discriminates between thinking, and discriminates between values and values, we call it intellect, which is more precise than thinking. Now, if there is a deciding faculty, if there is a thinking faculty, there must be something which is experiencing this and this and this and this. We call it ego. These are the different names according to the functioning of consciousness. Just for our understanding, we say consciousness, ego aspect of consciousness, intellect aspect of consciousness, mind aspect of consciousness, aspects of consciousness. And then the sight, eyesight, sense of hearing, sense of smell. These are all the aspects of, or the means of perception. Through the smell we perceive something, through ears we hear something, through eyes we see something. So from ego to intellect to mind to senses to outer perceptions, this is how the abstract, absolute being expresses itself in the finer relatives and grosser relatives and grosser relatives and very gross relatives, the whole universe. These are all the stages of evolution of individual life: ego, intellect, mind, senses, body, environment, world, whole universe, galaxies, extension of the individual life. That which decides, we call it intellect. That which thinks, we call mind. That which experiences, that which perceives, that which is the doer, the knower, the experiencer, that we call ego. And in meditation, as we experience final state of the mantra, mind is involved, intellect is involved, ego is involved, because without ego there won't be any experience. Without mind there won't be any thinking. Without intellect there won't be this decisive aspect of thinking that now the mantra is gross, it is subtle. This experience of definite nature belongs to the aspect of intellect. So, and then when we take the mantra, what happens? Mantra is a sound. Sound obviously has a touch. So the sense of touch is involved in thinking the mantra. And the mantra has a particular impulse. An impulse has a form, a wavelength. It has a form. When it has a form, it must have some smell. If there is smell, there must be some taste involved, one into the other, even though in a very fine aspect. But each word that we speak, each thought that we think has a form. With the form goes the smell and the taste and the touch, the sound. So all these 5 fields of perception are involved in the perception of a thought. And when the thought is experienced in the finer phases, all these 5 means of perception are used in their increasingly finer phases. Much finer aspect of sense of sight, much finer aspect of sense of hearing, much finer aspect of sense of smell, sense of taste. They are all involved. And as we experience finer and finer phases of the mantra, what we are doing is we are utilizing finer phases of perception of all these 5 senses. And by using the finer phases of all the 5 senses, what we are doing is we are enlivening those areas of the machinery of perception which have not been enlivened so far. And this is how our perception becomes sharper. A machine which we never use becomes rusted. It doesn't function efficiently. Now, this is a machinery of perception. If we are open only to the perception of the gross all the time, by gross I mean we see big forms, we hear big sounds. When the form becomes very minute, we fail to perceive it. Very fine, we need a microscope. See, the form is there, but our eyes don't see. That means when we are behaving ordinarily in daily life, then we are using only the grosser values of our sense of perception. Only the, we may say, outer or grosser, I don't know how to express it, but that is what it means. Grosser value of the senses of perception. And when we start experiencing finer phases of the thought, we immediately enliven and put to use finer values of these senses of perception. By the time we have experienced the finest, faintest aspect of the thought, we have enlivened the entire field of every faculty of perception. All the 5 senses of perception have been enlivened to their maximum value. And when the mind transcends, all the 5 senses are waiting in their most enlivened value, and that is full alertness of the machinery of perception. Full alertness of the machinery of perception in the state where the mind has gained unbounded awareness. And all the senses are now waiting, fully enlivened for their maximum value. And when the mind comes out again, a thought, another thought on the gross, the senses have something to perceive again back. And then again that perception of finer and finer enlivens again all those fields of perception. The entire machinery of perception becomes enlivened in every inward stroke of meditation and comes out. In the outer stroke of meditation, the machinery of perception is again used for its grosser values. By the time it gets to finer phases of perception of the mantra, again the whole machinery is used for its finer value. This enlivening the entire physical machinery of perception improves the ability of perception. And this is how senses become sharp, mind becomes sharp, intellect becomes sharp, and this is the evolution of the individual life, when the entire machinery of perception is most enlivened. All the senses are capable of perceiving the maximum value of the object of perception because they are fully alive. Fully. And this improves the appreciation value, the value of the appreciation of the world. The value of the world improves with our improved ability of perception. All these restrictions in the overflowing love in the field of behavior is only due to our inability to perceive the whole thing. Restricted perception causes smallness in our vision, and then that distorts our understanding, that distorts our behavior, and then we become so localized, just so localized. As if a president of the state, his vision falls on one farm. He is spending all the time in improving a farm, only so much of the land, whereas his vision has to be on the whole land of the country. That is what makes life very unfulfilled, and it's not worth it. When one can have that big, huge possibility on the level of perception, understanding, action, on the level of one's awareness. So this aspect of education to develop not only the mind through the information, outer information about this, the mind does expand when one reads about physics and chemistry, all the unknown areas of life brought to knowledge, mind expands. But this expansion of mind is not enough for the total fulfillment of life. Mind as such should expand. Awareness as such should expand. The ability of perception should expand with the expansion of the mind, intellect, ego. And this will be a fully developed individual. The main aim of education is to develop full individual. And to develop full individual means spontaneously he should be able to use all the faculties of perception and action to their fullest capacity. And this use of total value of each faculty of perception and action is nothing that needs development. It only needs use of it. We make use of the finer fields of the different faculties of perception, and by use they develop into their use. When we use them, then they develop into their use. If we don't use them, their use remains restricted. We don't have to develop the faculties of perception and action. They are there, all the five of them. They are there already in their fully developed state. Only we have to start using the totality of their value. As long as our perception is restricted to the grosser values, so long we are not using their finer values. And therefore, we have only to allow them to perceive something finer and finer and finer and finer and finer. Thought is a field with which all the five senses are connected. Thought is that field of perception, with sound is that field of perception with which all the five senses of perception are naturally connected. We start using the finer phases of the sound, finer phases of the thought, and then we are enlivening hitherto unused levels of this machinery of perception. Put it to use. And what we are developing, not the faculties as such, but developing their use, their applied values. So far we were not making use of them in the practical field for our advantage in the growth of life. Now we have started to use them. So the thing is there, we have only to start. The technique of TM is a way, or is a means, is a means to enable all the finer phases of the faculties of perception to come to use. And the whole thing is so spontaneous, automatic. What we are doing here now is just analyzing what happens during our meditation with reference to the senses, to the mind, the intellect, ego, the whole machinery of perception improves. And it improves in its applied values. And this is what development of life or evolution of life means on the practical level. You see the whole field of ego and intellect and mind and this, it could be very restricted if we don't use the faculties of perception. Then the ego will be small, and the mind will be small, and this will be small, and this will be small. But when we use these faculties, and the ego becomes greater, mind becomes greater, this becomes greater. Even though it remains an individual ego, but it does gain the status of cosmic ego, remaining as an individual ego. One example will clarify this. Green water in a glass. Now what we do is refine the water, modify water. And as the water is being refined, it's becoming less green and less green and less green. What is happening? The reflection is becoming less green and less green. And reflection becoming less green means reflection is gaining more and more quality of the original sun, becoming less green and less green. A time comes when the water reflector has been modified to such an extent that the reflection has gained the value of the sun around it. It's yet a reflection of that shape of glass, but the quality of the reflection is the quality of the sun. And this is what means the individual in the value of the universal. The individual in the value of universal. It is a reflection, but that reflection has gained the quality of the sun around it. And this is what it means that the individual consciousness develops and develops and developed. And how does the individual consciousness develop? By making use of the machinery through which the consciousness functions, refining the machinery, all this machinery of perception is enlivened, and it is this machinery of perception which reflects consciousness. It is this machinery of perception which reflects consciousness, and when the whole machinery of perception is fully enlivened, then the individual consciousness gains the value of universal consciousness. The individual, even though bound in time and space, lives the life unbounded, timeless, eternal. And this is what we call evolution. So it's not that one thing evolves, no. Either everything evolves or nothing evolves. But this statement is wrong, that nothing evolves. We may say either everything evolves quickly or everything evolves slowly. Evolution must be. It can't be that nothing evolves. Maybe one is not making any effort for evolution, but even so, as time goes on, the life is pushed on in the direction of the timeless. The time is pushing life towards timeless, more and more and more and more towards infinity. So evolution has to be there. But then with this technique of TM, we just take the whole reflector. What we do when we meditate physically, the whole swing of the activity of the nervous system takes a different quality. And this Dr. Kanalaga says, physiology of an evolving man. How the man is evolving. Man means everything, total individual existence, including ego, intellect, mind, senses, body, whole thing, environment, everything. The physiology changes as the individual evolves. Physiology of an evolving man. So, and this is by virtue of enlivening the machinery of perception. All the senses, the mind, intellect, ego, becomes most enlivened. And this most enlivened state of life is most evolved state of life. Most enlivened state of life, most evolved state of life, where the ego is fully alert. It's alert in its universal value. Intellect, mind is alert in its fully universal value. Senses alert to cognize any depth of reality of the object of perception. The whole thing means evolution, and this is the evolution of consciousness.